situación era de un vegetal, que no, lo que iba a venir al mundo era una niña vegetal, solo no iba a poder respirar por sí misma, no iba a poder andar, no iba a poder hablar, no iba a poder hacer nada. No saben si duraría una hora, un día o un año. Cuando me quedé embarazada, el mismo día que me quedé embarazada, yo ya lo sabía, y a medida que iban pasando los días, yo me daba cuenta que no iban dentro de mí las cosas muy bien. Entonces fue una cosa que no me gustó ya desde un principio, porque yo había tenido otra hija hacía 3 años anteriormente, y desde el principio no había tenido esas sensaciones, ni hubo que medir nada, ni repetir pruebas. También tuve algún sangrado, fui a urgencias al hospital de Burela, que era el que me correspondía, de Amariña. Allí me miraron y me dijeron que era normal, que era por el embarazo. Y cuando fui a hacer la revisión siguiente, que era a las 20 semanas, pues fue cuando una doctora me dijo que tenía que darme una buena y una mala noticia, que cuál quería oír primero. Yo estaba con mi pareja y nos quedamos un poco perplejos porque nos parecía una cosa que no era para jugar, una vida humana, y entonces le dijimos que por favor nos dijera primero la mala noticia. Entonces nos dijo que no era nada importante, que simplemente era que unas medidas craneales estaban casi en el límite, una por abajo y otra por arriba, y que la niña traía unos quistes en los plexos coroideos. Claro, a nosotros decir no hay problemas y mencionar cerebro, pues ya nos pareció que sí que había problemas. Me dijo que estuviera tranquila, que por el bien de mi hija, que tenía que estar tranquila y que ella ya me pediría más pruebas, que eso seguramente que no sería nada, que a medida que fuera avanzando el embarazo, pues se irían corrigiendo, ya cogería sus medidas buenas y desaparecerían los plexos. Yo me fui para casa nerviosísima, pero bueno, antes de esto me dijo que la buena noticia era que era una niña. Yo le dije que para mí la buena noticia era que lo que fuese, niño o niña, tuviera salud. Cuando fui a este ginecólogo privado, me dijeron que estaba todo muy mal. No me quiso ni enseñar a la niña en el ecógrafo. Que estaba todo mal, que yo era una chica muy joven, tenía solo 33 años, y que él no practicaba abortos, pero que había sitios en España que sí que los practicaban. Yo con esa información llegué el martes a las 8 de la mañana sin cita al hospital. Yo le dije que no podía esperar porque estaba en la 21ª semana de embarazo. En España la interrupción tiene un límite y que yo ya estaba casi en el límite, entonces que por favor, que venía de un médico privado que me había dicho todo lo contrario a lo que ellos me habían dicho el viernes, y que por favor que me mirara, que era muy importante. Se negó a mirarme, me dijo que era una estresada y una histérica, que lo único que hacía era hacerle daño a mi hija dentro del vientre por todo mi nerviosismo. Me dijo que no me iba a atender, que me esperara a mi cita y que ese médico privado me tenía que justificar lo que me había cobrado y por eso me metiera miedo. Cuando me mandaron a hacer la miocentesis, yo ya estaba fuera de la ley, ya estaba de 23 semanas. Yo pedí que me la hicieran antes, no podía ser. Entonces me mandaron para el hospital de Lugo a hacer la miocentesis. En el hospital de Lugo, el ginecólogo que me hizo la miocentesis me insistió en que no la hiciera, que era una tontería porque estaba fuera de plazo para poder abortar en España. Cuando llegué la semana de 31 me atendió otra ginecóloga y me dijo que bueno, que seguían sin saber lo que tenía mi niña, pero que no era seguramente nada importante, que podría ser un ojo verde, un ojo azul, un mechón de pelo blanco, que nosotros no éramos portadores de esa delección, que nosotros teníamos el genotipo bien, seguro médico, y me dijo que había un doctor en Madrid muy importante y una clínica en Barcelona también muy importante en genética. Cuando le dije que estaba de 31 semanas, se quedó paralizado. Me dijo que era muy tarde, que como no antes, como no me habían dicho nada, como a estas alturas estaba embarazada. Todo en una tarde. Y en una tarde me dijeron que mi hija venía incompatible con la vida. Y que por ser tan grave se podía ya intervenir, que se podría intervenir. Para mí fue muy duro, pero la tomamos entre los dos, entre mi pareja y yo, y decidimos intervenirlo. Cuando llegué a Burela, al día siguiente, recogí el sobre. Me dijeron que si quería que no lo abriese. Era un sobre donde me ponían las opciones que tenía para si quería seguir con el embarazo. Que era darla en adopción al nacer y poco más. Después, cuando fui a Madrid por la mañana, el día que me iban a ingresar, yo marché el día anterior, dormí allí en un hotel. Madrid está a 600 kilómetros de donde yo vivo, tuve que ir en coche, en mi coche. Y llevé un viaje bastante malo porque iba sangrando. Y cuando me bajaron para empezar, primero me miraron y al mirarme con el aparato se me rompió el útero. Entonces me taponaron con gasas y me derivaron al Hospital La Paz, que es un hospital público, porque me dijo el ginecólogo que estaba muy grave, que no podían hacer nada y que no sabían cómo había llegado con vida a Madrid, que me había roto el útero y que era muy urgente, que estaba muy grave. Me trasladaron en ambulancia para el hospital público. Me preguntaron si venía de un piso, pensando que, no sé qué pudieron pensar, si lo hubiera hecho yo de forma particular, la interrupción o algo, porque ese era el tono. Y dije que no, que venía de la clínica Isadora, pero que con las prisas por la gravedad se había quedado el historial allí, el doctor no lo había incluido en la ambulancia. Cuando me llevaron para la sala para verme, me sentaron, yo casi no me podía ya ni sentar, y al quitar las gasas se produjo una hemorragia enorme y empezaron a gritar y a taponarme. Con el espéculo no podían meter la gasa y tuvieron que meterlo con la mano porque me desangraba. Y fue muy doloroso. Tengo el recuerdo de gritar mucho por el dolor. Ya me subieron para arriba para operarme, que intentarían salvar mi vida. Yo le dije que por favor, que tenía otra niña de 3 años, que por favor que hicieran lo posible por salvarme la vida, porque tenía la otra niña y no quería dejarla sola en este mundo. Y yo dije que vale. Entonces me No me pude despedir de mi pareja, fue ponerme una máscara y ya no me acuerdo de nada más. Después desperté en la UCI y pregunté qué pasara con la niña. Me dijeron que había nacido con un poquito de vida, pero que a los minutos pues había fallecido, bueno, después de un tiempo.
En España tenemos un problema muy serio porque no en todas las regiones ocurre lo mismo, pero hay regiones como en el norte, como Galicia y Murcia, en donde directamente no se practican casi ningún aborto, no se practican abortos, porque mayoritariamente los doctores y otro personal de salud son objetores. Detrás de la objeción de conciencia lo que hay al final son creencias religiosas, de los políticos, de algunos jueces, del establishment médico. Nosotros somos un país católico en el que aunque la ley claramente permite en ciertas circunstancias la interrupción, esto no es asumido por gran parte de la sociedad, que de una manera u otra lo obstaculizan. Esas personas, como he dicho antes, son políticos, son jueces, son médicos, son enfermeras, son anestesistas. Paula vino a consultarme porque en su segundo embarazo le habían ocultado en el Servicio Gallego de Salud, en el Hospital de Burela, le habían ocultado que el feto padecía gravísimas malformaciones y habían retrasado la interrupción voluntaria del embarazo hasta que el feto tenía ya 7 meses y medio. Consiguieron salvar la vida de Paula, pero ella perdió su útero. Quedó estéril con 34 años y queriendo fundar una familia. Fue muy traumático esta experiencia para ellos. Paula además se dedicaba a cuidar niños, con lo cual tuvo que abandonar su trabajo, sufrió estrés postraumático, su marido también sufrió secuelas psicológicas muy graves.
A veces creo que los médicos se deshumanizan y no saben que están tratando con personas. Pues por poner un ejemplo, a mí me pasaron cuando Priscila le tuvieron que hacer la cesárea para sacar a la niña. Yo estaba sentado en el pasillo con otra señora que estaba esperando a que naciera su nieta, que no nos conocía de nada, ni sabía nada de la historia, y vi cómo se acercaba a una incubadora con una niña. Y el celador le dijo así con el gesto hacia mí, a una pediatra, a una doctora. Entonces me la pasaron por delante y se acercó a mí y me dijo que bueno, que había salido la niña con una cesárea y tal, que sí quería que se reanimara, que venía con muchos problemas, con una señora al lado que no me conocía de nada mirando así. Yo le dije que no, que veníamos de Isadora de hacer una interrupción y que no veía, que venía con muchísimos problemas y que no quería reanimar. Todo con la mirada pues, de la señora pues, diciendo, un padre que no quiere reanimar a su niña.
Y nada, al final él tuvo que encargarse en Madrid, que nosotros somos un pueblo de 9.000 habitantes, tuvo que encargarse de llamar a la funeraria, de llevar para que la recogieran y la incineraran. Y todo eran apuros burocráticos, nadie se preocupó por el estado psicológico, ni mío ni de él. Solo eran de hay que registrarla, hay que sacarla de aquí, no puede estar más tiempo aquí, llama a una funeraria, llama a quien quieras, hay que llevarla. Nosotros la queríamos dejar para saber si podíamos ayudar a alguien más en un futuro, para que no pasara por lo nuestro, porque el caso que traía a mi hija era un caso por 40 millones o no había casos vivos. Su vida dentro de mí, porque fuera de mí no la iba a tener. Y no fue justo para ella seguir creciendo dentro de mí para salir, para sufrir. Porque el poco que vivió, el tiempo que estuvo aquí, estuvo conectada a máquinas. No estuvo su madre al lado, que era yo. No tuvo a nadie. No pudo oír ni mi voz. Entonces, yo creo que fue mucho sufrimiento para ella tener que salir de mí.
Los profesionales que objetan en conciencia tienen que ayudar al cumplimiento del derecho de esa mujer. No pueden ser un obstáculo, simplemente tienen que explicar a la mujer que no pueden participar de manera directa. El problema radica en que hay mucha pseudo-objeción de conciencia, falsa objeción de conciencia, servicios enteros, hospitales enteros, comunidades enteras que objetan. Eso es ilegal y no es ético. Los profesionales no quieren verse involucrados, muchos profesionales, no quieren verse involucrados en la atención a las mujeres que solicitan la interrupción, no por verdaderos problemas de conciencia, sino por otras cuestiones, para evitar ser mal vistos en los servicios de ginecología, porque se encuentran en hospitales con convicciones, cuya dirección tiene convicciones morales o religiosas concretas, para no complicarse la vida en una tarea que está relativamente mal vista, para no ser estigmatizados como los que practican interrupciones. Sin embargo, la legalización de la interrupción voluntaria del embarazo en nuestro país puso de manifiesto la carencia de formación universitaria en este tema. No se nos había formado a los ginecólogos ni a los médicos en general en este tema en absoluto. Ni una mención, como no fuera para reprobarla, de la interrupción voluntaria del embarazo, del derecho de las mujeres a decidir, de las técnicas que deberían utilizarse para conseguir una interrupción segura, sin consecuencias indeseables para las mujeres.
Quiero decir que el caso de Paula no es un caso aislado, pertenece a una situación, un problema sistemático de este servicio de salud, y que a lo largo de este caso he conocido a otras muchas mujeres que se han visto expuestas a situaciones similares. El juez entendió claramente que si Paula hubiera sido atendida en el Servicio Gallego de Salud, probablemente no hubiera perdido el útero. El juez incluso dijo que la cuantía que habíamos pedido indemnizatoria no era bastante para compensar tantísimo sufrimiento como en este caso había ocurrido. Ha sido una satisfacción moral enorme para mis clientes y para mí como abogada feminista que soy.
Y yo creo que nadie debe pasar por lo que pasé yo, ni ningún ser vivo tiene que pasar por lo que pasó mi hija.
I did some research on the history of conscientious objection because I wanted to figure out how did this get started. And discovered that the very first time that conscientious objection was explicitly allowed by law was in the UK 1967 Abortion Act. So that was the first instance in any kind of healthcare was abortion. So even today, 50 years later, conscientious objection is still exercised mostly for abortion and other reproductive health care such as contraception, vasectomy, etc. And only just recently it started to be used for medical assistance in dying as well. And another interesting thing about the history was I wondered why why that particular clause on conscientious objection was included in the UK Abortion Act. How did it get there? That law legalized abortion in the UK. I actually had email contact with Lord David Steele, who was the MP at the time in the UK who introduced the Act, and I asked him how it got there. And I had read in a book somewhere that it was introduced for pragmatic reasons as a compromise in order to get the bill passed.
The original abortion bill did not contain a conscience clause, and what happened was that during the passage of the bill, I had many conversations, at least 3, with a Catholic seminary in my constituency. And they were training priests, and they were, of course, very strongly opposed to the bill that I was introducing. And so after these 3 discussions, I agreed that we should have a conscience clause so that no Catholic or anybody who had a rooted objection to abortion would ever be required to take part in the operation. And that was the origin of it. And so when the bill was going through the House of Commons, we passed an amendment to add the conscience clause into the bill. And everybody welcomed that. The committee was a committee of, I think, about 20 people across party, including some strong opponents of the bill, and I had in support on my side representatives from the Home Office, the Department of Health and the Scottish Office. And the committee approved the idea of having a conscience clause. But it was basically my suggestion following the discussions in the borders. Well, a lot of countries copied our law. In fact, I did quite a lot of traveling to seminars and medical conferences in countries like Canada, Kenya, Trinidad, just to mention 3 that I went to talk about how we had changed the law and then they changed their law. So many of them copied our conscience clause.
Valentina era stato interessante di 2 gemelli. L'ho visitata e gli ho detto che si trattava di un maschietto e di una femminuccia, quindi lei era felicissima. Prima di lasciare lo studio, però il ginecologo ha detto di controllare l'utero, il collo dell'utero. Quando ho visto mia figlia sbiancare in faccia perché il medico ha subito notato che c'era una dilatazione di 1,5 centimetri del collo dell'utero e quindi lei ci ha detto deve andare subito in ospedale, essere ricoverata e da oggi in poi quella fino al parto, ma in questi 17 giorni quando io la mattina ci andavo a trovarla gli dicevo è passato tutto il ginecologo, sono passati i medici, cosa ti hanno detto? Dici papà, passano di qua, il mio ginecologo non si è visto, si vede ogni tanto, ma passano di qua, ma a me non fanno mai niente, mi dicono tu devi stare a riposo, tu a riposo, però non mi fanno controlli, non mi fanno ecografie, tant'è che Valentina in un ospedale, non in un casolare di campagna, ma in un ospedale dove doveva essere protetta lei e i suoi gemellini, ha preso la sepsis. E nessun medico se ne è accorto. Questa sepsi è esplosa il 15 mattina alle 9 di mattina con febbre alta, vomito e dolori terribili. L'infermiera, non so se l'ha d'iniziativa sua o l'ha chiesto a qualche medico che non era presente nel reparto di ginecologia, ha messo una tachipirina per via endovenosa che le ha fatto scendere la febbre, la temperatura a 34, però è subito risalita, per cui i segni della sepsi c'erano tutti, però non c'era un medico quel giorno, basta, non ci hanno fatto niente.
Dopo
L'hanno
poco
lasciata
è
là.
arrivato con un medico e questo medico ha fatto l'ecografia. Allora ho detto, dottore, mia figlia sta troppo male. Signore, i cuoricini battono, io non posso ammazzare i bambini. Ho detto, ma guardi che mia figlia sta troppo male. Sì, ma non possiamo fare niente per ora perché i cuori dei bambini battono. Io sono un obiettore di coscienza.
Tu devi salvare la vita alla mamma, non pensare ai bambini che hanno 17-18 settimane e non possono vivere. Siamo arrivati alle 11. Alle 11 questo medico apre lui la porta e ci dice uno dei cuoricini non batte più, per cui io procedo a farlo all'espellere, a farlo uscire. Noi l'abbiamo pregato dicendoci, dottore, mia figlia ha dalle 9 di mattina che grida,
Abbiamo detto,
faccia uscire tutti e due i bambini, la liberi, perché non può andare avanti così con queste grida che noi ce l'abbiamo nel cervello. Ho fatto l'ecografia, ancora c'è un cuoricino che batte, per cui io, essendo obiettore di coscienza, non posso intervenire. È entrato, poi è uscito nuovamente e ci ha detto la bambina era la femminuccia, è nata, se la volete vedere. Ho visto questo bambino, questa bambina che era quasi nera, scura, era scura questa bambina, verso l'uscita, e abbiamo visto mia figlia, sempre era su un fianco che gridava dei dolori e chiamava dottore, dottore, aiutatemi, aiutatemi.
Mi sedi, io dicevo un barlume di speranza, non ce l'ho più, dicevo.
Perché non sopportava
non ho più un barlume di speranza, sedatemi.
Il medico del corridoio, grida anche scorbutico e poco educato, e ora dice ci mettiamo a sedare tutte le donne che devono partorire, questo ancora parlava di parto, va bene. Poi mia figlia è uscita e noi la sentivamo sempre gridare.
Dopo 2 ore poi.
Si sono fatte quasi l'una di notte, è uscito nuovamente questo medico e ci ha detto l'altro cuoricino ha cessato, quindi io procedo a farlo espellere. L'altro bambino è uscito, ce l'ha detto, il bambino è nato. Io ho chiesto, dottore, allora ce lo faccia vedere pure questo qua? No, dice non potete entrare. Noi non la sentivamo più mia figlia e secondo me l'ha ammazzata là. Mia figlia è morta là, secondo me.
Perché ha detto adesso la sediamo per far uscire le placente.
Per far uscire le placente. Dopodiché ha chiamato il papà e il marito e ci ha detto guardi, la ragazza è grave, la dobbiamo spostare in rianimazione. Come mia figlia che era in ottima salute in rianimazione, ma che cosa avete combinato? E abbiamo chiamato i carabinieri, poi l'hanno fatta uscire per la rianimazione sedata,
Dubata.
E non mi spiego perché ci avevano messo dei cerotti negli occhi, cioè ci hanno chiuso gli occhi con i cerotti
e indubata.
E l'hanno intubata e l'hanno portata in rianimazione.
No, e noi abbiamo chiesto, ma allora da questo momento noi quale referenza abbiamo? E lui ha detto niente, affidatevi, vi dovete affidare ai rianimatori e al Signore.
Poi c'è stato questo ignorantone di medico dove l'obiezione non c'entrava per niente, si trattava di salvare la vita di mia figlia perché i feti avevano 18-19 settimane, non potevano vivere, ma mia figlia poteva vivere. Ma responsabili sono tutte e 13 perché non l'hanno monitorata per assenteismo e per ignoranza, per incompetenza. Quindi è stato tutto, cioè l'hanno ammazzata mia figlia, l'hanno ammazzata.
Tra mille dolori.
Tra mille dolori.
E quindi noi in questo momento siamo totalmente disarmati. Ed è proprio questa percezione che ci aiuta a capire come è morta Valentina. Se nessuno più difende la laicità dello Stato, i diritti delle donne, il diritto al corpo, il diritto alla scelta, perché ci stiamo trasformando in sudditi, in gente senza poter neanche sapere quello che ci sta succedendo, allora è chiaro che chiunque può permettersi di dire: io sono un obiettore, io non intervengo, perché il potere della Chiesa è comunque più forte. Il nostro ministro della Salute, Patricia, fa parte di un'organizzazione europea che si chiama Uno di Noi, laddove uno di noi è l'embrione. Perché quello che si cerca di fare è esattamente sostenere che l'embrione e il feto sono persona, con non soltanto pari diritti, ma con più diritti della donna che lo porta in grembo. Questo espone chiaramente le donne a un rischio, perché se il prodotto del concepimento a qualunque settimana viene prima della mia vita, io posso essere esposta a un rischio di morte. Questo risorgere dell'obbligo del dolore. Questo italiano che vive a Praga e che capeggia l'obiezione all'aborto ha scritto un articolo contro la diagnosi preimpianto, e la diagnosi preimpianto è un gesto di rispetto, di solidarietà con le famiglie che hanno questo rischio. Ma lui ha scritto: questo dolore che Dio manda a queste famiglie non deve essere evitato, perché quando Dio manda il dolore è quello che tu devi accettare. A un certo punto Valentina, secondo quello che ci racconta la madre, ha detto: io sto morendo, per favore sedatemi, perché non si può morire con questi dolori. E la mamma di Valentina gli ha detto: ma cosa dici? Ma mica stai morendo. E non si fanno capaci di non aver capito del fatto che nessuno gli ha detto. Mai potevano pensare che stava morendo davvero.
Noi abbiamo un pugnale nel cuore, però non è giusto che altre giovani donne vadano lì per dare la vita a esseri umani e debbano venire uccise come è stata uccisa mia figlia con i suoi gemellini, perché di omicidio si tratta.
In Italia il grosso problema è che la percentuale dei medici obiettori è continuamente in aumento. siamo passati nel 2005 dal circa 56% come media, nel 2013 siamo arrivati al 70% come media, ma ci sono zone come per esempio nel Lazio in cui siamo arrivati al 91,3% di obiettori. Il medico non obiettore quando entra in ospedale si deve preoccupare di tutto perché tutti scappano, quindi lui si deve occupare dei materiali. Ci sono delle ferriste che non lavano i ferri che lui ha usato per fare l'aborto ed è lui che li deve lavare. Ci sono portantine che non portano le donne in sala operatoria. Ci sono anestesisti che non vogliono anestesizzare le donne, quindi lui si trova a voler far rispettare una legge, ma si trova in un ambiente ostile che gli crea molta difficoltà per poter attuare questa legge.
Noi abbiamo un ospedale, il San Camillo, che è il centro di riferimento regionale per l'applicazione della legge 194. Questo ospedale ha fatto un concorso per avere il primario, è arrivata prima una ginecologa proveniente dal Policlinico Gemelli come formazione, che è l'ospedale del Vaticano. Perché i ginecologi universitari laici non si presentano ai concorsi? Può essere perché il direttore della nostra università laica è passato all'Opus Dei, al campus biomedico, prima di diventare direttore della nostra università laica.
Durante i funerali a casa mia è stata la morte di Valentina la pena di tutta la cittadina e anche dei paesini vicini. Sono venute migliaia di persone e molte giovani donne diciamo: ma dobbiamo avere paura di partorire pure.
Lo que yo pasé y aún lo llevo dentro. Cada día que pasaba no sabía lo que me iba a enfrentar. No sabía al final, pero por dentro sí que lo sabía. Sabía lo que me iba a pasar porque yo no me encontraba igual que en los otros embarazos. Me costaba caminar. La tensión la tenía muy baja, la pierna derecha cuando caminaba pues no. Entonces no tenía contestación, nadie me la daba. Me van a decir la verdad porque yo ya aquí no sentía seguridad ninguna, tanto por la ginecóloga privada como por la pública. Cuando me hice la amniocentesis, nos reunimos mi marido, mi madre y yo. Mi madre le dijo a ella: María, esto creo que es cosa de aborto. Yo esto no lo veo normal. ¿Crees que deberíamos de abortar? Y ella rotundamente dijo, muy seca, hablando con un carácter así muy seco, dijo: no. Isabel, le dijo a mi madre, esto no es cosa de aborto, porque tenga unos pies torcidos, unos pies zangos, esto no es cosa de aborto, eso se corrige y ya está. Entonces no eran tan solo los pies, sino que mi niño tenía pielestasia renal bilateral, luego conforme hemos ido ahora investigando los papeles, pues había un corazón hiperecogénito en grado 6 y sobre todo un bajo peso, porque mi hijo nació con 1,6 kg.
En la semana 20 el niño se alimentaba mal y además iba asociado a un cuadro de deficiencias morfológicas Es que evidentemente todo cabe sospechar a que el pequeño se está formando mal y conforme vaya evolucionando no va a crecer bien adecuadamente. Bien, los médicos generalmente tienden no les cuadra esa información, intentan despistar aparentemente, ¿vale? Pero en este caso los médicos creemos que actuaron un poco sesgando esa información y no tuvimos una información objetiva de lo que estaba pasando. Todo lo contrario, o sea, veían todo como algo normal.
Y bueno, pues ya cuando doy a luz, pues nace el niño, pues ya imagínate, un trauma ya impresionante. Cuando voy ahí en silla de ruedas a ver los neonatos, pues me encuentro con un niño, bueno, una imagen horrorosa, pues como un fetico, un feto sin peso, desfigurado, algo que dices, madre mía, ¿esto qué es? Te quedas, de repente entras en el infierno más absoluto. Más luego los 2 meses que estuve allí, que fueron horribles, porque no te daban nada de información, todo era tema tabú. Claro, yo allí es donde yo ya fui consciente y iba dándome cuenta de todo lo que me había pasado.
Bueno, el niño básicamente tiene un estado hipotónico general, que es como un estado de flojedad, de poca fuerza. Es un niño que tiene movilidad, pero no sabemos hasta qué punto, no sabemos si podrá caminar, si podrá coger cosas, porque él apenas tiene fuerza, no tiene fuerza. Él tiene una enfermedad neuromuscular grave, eso es evidente. Lo que pasa es que todavía no se ha podido diagnosticar esa enfermedad. El cuadro más preocupante a día de hoy es que él no puede hacer sus necesidades, no puede defecar. Tenemos que ayudarle manualmente, porque tampoco queremos acostumbrarle a los laxantes farmacológicos, aunque estamos en un periodo utilizándole uno muy suave para poder ayudarle. Pero básicamente todo este tiempo hemos tenido que ayudarle porque el niño por sí solo no puede hacerlo. Afortunadamente el pequeño ha podido empezar a comer con cuchara porque al principio no tenía fuerza para poder tragar, no podía deglutir. El niño se ha estado alimentando como 1 año y medio aproximadamente con una sonda nasogástrica. Y evidentemente mi hijo, en este caso. Mi hijo ha sufrido un calvario, ha sufrido todo el dolor que un ser humano posiblemente pueda sufrir. Entonces, este tipo de cosas en un mundo, en el siglo en el que vivimos, no se deberían de permitir.
Y como comentaba antes, pues nuestra vida ha cambiado 100%. Porque claro, nosotros pues ahora mismo no estamos trabajando, estamos dedicados prácticamente al bebé las 24 horas. Y claro, pues es un sufrimiento y pues bueno, porque intentamos no pensarlo y tal, pero no saber qué es lo que va a pasar con tu hijo, ya que a través de investigaciones que hemos hecho, pues hemos podido comprobar que el 100% de los ginecólogos ginecólogos obstetras de la región de Murcia son todos objetores de conciencia.
Nosotros estamos buscando el embarazo, me quedo embarazada, estamos muy ilusionados. Es una niña, más todavía porque ya tenemos el niño, la parejita.
Bueno, desde el principio que detectamos en la primera consulta, a las 20 semanas, que algo no iba bien, lo que sentíamos es que nos trataban de alargar plazos, no nos decían la verdad o qué estaba ocurriendo.
Vamos por nuestros propios medios a Madrid, vamos para allá, nos hace la resonancia, que tuvimos que pagarla con nuestros propios medios y no es barata. Y luego pues nos dio el gospetazo de nuestra vida. Nos dijo de que la niña nos daba un 90% con la resonancia, con lo que se ve. Luego está lo que no se ve en la resonancia. Ahí nos hundimos los dos, bajamos de Madrid para Cartagena ese mismo día y mi pareja empieza a explicarle al nuevo ginecólogo todo el proceso que hemos pasado, con ansiedad porque, claro, no estábamos bien. De repente el ginecólogo le dice: no me faltes al respeto. Mi pareja dice: yo no estoy faltando al respeto, lo que le estoy explicando a este señor es todo lo que hemos pasado. Y su respuesta fue, que esa me dolió en toda mi alma, es: no, si no hace falta que apuntes nada, si estos quieren abortar, aquí tienen los papeles. Esa palabra se me ha quedado clavada totalmente, porque mi pareja reaccionó y dijo: perdona, yo no quiero abortar, porque si hubiera abortado, al mes de haberse quedado ya embarazada, lo hubiera hecho. Yo lo que quiero saber es lo que tiene mi hija. Y ustedes no me dan nada más que a lo mejor. Y esta persona me ha dicho que mi hija viene más del 90%. Y yo lo que quiero es saber. Entonces se rieron del informe de Madrid y me dijeron que no sabían por qué había ido a Madrid, que allí había neurólogos pediátricos. Y mi pareja contestó: vamos a ver, hay neurólogos pediátricos y me está diciendo desde las 20 semanas que mi hija lo que tiene de cabeza no había sido capaz de llamar al neurólogo pediátrico y verlo. Allí pues decidimos nosotros que queríamos ver a ese neurólogo pediátrico, fuimos a verlo. Y el mismo médico pediátrico nos confirmó lo mismo que de Madrid. Me dijo, estas fueron sus palabras: si este muchacho te ha puesto el 90%, este médico, yo te puedo decir 85%, con lo que se ve, y luego está lo que no se ve. Y me dio, digamos, algunas críos que habían ahí con problemas, me dijo los problemas que tenían y que podía tener mi hija.
El feto de Antonia tenía agenesia total del cuerpo calloso, que es una enfermedad congénita que significa que no se ha formado el cuerpo calloso, que para entendernos es la estructura que conecta ambos hemisferios en el cerebro, el derecho y el izquierdo. Es una enfermedad muy grave, es una enfermedad que supone graves daños psicomotrices, en el lenguaje, en la coeficiente intelectual. De hecho, para hacernos una idea de lo grave que es, la Comisión Bioética de la Sociedad Española de Ginecología y Obstetricia la ha catalogado como una de las enfermedades más graves e incurables, frente a las cuales siempre se tiene que permitir la práctica o la interrupción de un embarazo, aunque sean estados de gestación muy avanzados.
Entonces ya con todo lo que nos habían dicho, pues decidimos que no era vida para ella, porque no sabíamos cómo iba a ser, nos daban todo como una niña vegetal, como una niña que no tendría comunicación, más lo que no se ve. Decidimos que no era vida para ella, no por nosotros, sino para ella. ¿Qué vida iba a tener mi hija así?
In Sweden, we have a rights law for abortion. It was a law that was implemented in 1974. The Act does not contain a conscience clause, and there is no possibility for the person working in the healthcare, and specifically in abortion healthcare, to say they do not want to perform abortion.
Conscientious objection is a major problem on a global level. I've been traveling around in Europe during the last years, and I've seen the consequences. It limits the right and the access to abortion. It's something quite new actually in Sweden. What we can see now is a much more strategic abortion resistance. And since the right to abortion in Sweden has a large support amongst the general public and also within the parliament amongst politicians, it's very hard to ask for laws and restrictions when it comes to the right to abortion, because people think that women should have the right to decide if they want to do an abortion. The anti-abortion groups in Sweden, they're quite small, but they're becoming more and more strategic, and they also find partners in Europe and also in US. So they are trying to attack the right to abortion, and they do it at the moment through conscientious objections. So then they are trying to raise this issue with the midwife, and they want people to think that look at this poor midwife, she should have the right to decide if she wants to work with abortion or not. So it's really a way of trying to attack the issue from another angle or another perspective, and not talk about the right to abortion. Talk about this poor midwife who doesn't have the right to decide. Of course, they are not only thinking of 1 or 2 midwives. I mean, this costs quite a lot of money to go to court with these cases. So, of course, the aim is to change the law. And the aim is to attack the right to abortion.
The Swedish Discrimination Act has been used in the court cases with the midwives, and they have found that the midwives were not discriminated, but they have been claiming they want to use the European Convention on Human Rights, and specifically Article 9, where everyone has the right to have a religion or another belief and the right to exercise their beliefs. The Labour court found that they were not discriminated.
We can hear from the midwife and her lawyer saying this can't be so much fuss about one midwife saying no here and one midwife saying no there. But it is, because here and there it could be small apartments where there's only perhaps 2 midwives working, and if one says no for conscientious objections, there's only one left. And that would mean less access to early abortions. It will also become some sort of a slippery slope, because when you open up for this, it could be like in Italy, we know, where there are so many physicians that says no to abortions. But you open up for contraceptives. You can open up for blood giving or whatever. We have a democratic, decided abortion law. And then it should open up to a person from personal beliefs to say no to that. How come? Why?
So no one is forced to become a doctor or to choose a certain speciality or to become a midwife. And that's why I don't think it applies to healthcare. I think it's also important that everyone who trained to become a gynecologist also train in abortion care, and everyone who trained to become a midwife are also aware that this is part of midwifery. So the young medical students, sometimes they are very naive, they have not been exposed so much to real life. And I think it's very important to discuss with them, because they tend to see things in black and white. So they can state that or believe that this is a certain kind of women. And I think it's also very important then what they see, because we are lucky that we have abortion integrated in the public health care, so they can see themselves that it's actually the same women who come to the delivery ward who may then come to the abortion clinic. It's not a certain kind of woman, but it applies to all women. And actually, according to the Swedish law, which I like very much, is that women don't need to state an indication. it's not for the doctor to, or anyone else, to decide whether they would need an abortion or not. It's actually the woman herself who is the best suited to make this decision, because no one else knows exactly her situation. And I think women need to be trusted to make decisions about their own lives.
And what we know is when you limit the access to abortion, people still do abortion. Either they do it within the country, illegal, and they have to pay often lots of money, or they travel outside the country to get the access. So no matter if abortion is legal or not, people still do terminate the pregnancies. And we know due to the World Health Association that about 50,000 women every year die due to illegal abortions.
I am the first one. She called and she said she's pregnant. She didn't even tell her parents. She found out, she called and she started to say, what should I do next, what's next, what's next? She was loved by everyone in the community. All the kids love her. Today, Sunday morning, I believe, Sunday morning, she texted saying she's feeling the water. She went to toilet many times. Is it normal? I told her go to the emergency because Sunday all GPs are closed. So she went, and by afternoon they sent her away saying that she's okay, for fetal heartbeat is good.
When she first attended the hospital, her cervix was open and the junior doctor who examined felt the membranes bulging. And yet she was not admitted. She did not have a scan. She was sent home. And then shortly after reaching home, she burst the waters and she felt that there was some fetal part. And they went back to the hospital. And that's when she was admitted. But yet, all she got was a small dose of antibiotic by mouth. No, in normal circumstances, normal medical practice in most countries, the pregnancy would be terminated to save the life of the mother. And that didn't happen here because of the law and the interpretation of the law by the medical team. They told that she would not be having a medical termination of pregnancy when the fetal heart was present.
Around 12 o'clock or 11, a lady came and she asked to do something because she can't wait for the fetal heartbeat to stop and she feels like she's having the baby. It's the other way around. And they denied it. They can't do it.
You cannot control sepsis by antibiotics only. You need to eliminate the source of the sepsis. So she had already ruptured the membranes when she went into the hospital. Her cervix was dilated, so it was an open door for infection to enter. And she developed amniochorionitis, which is infection within the womb. The doctor saw that she was suffering from sepsis, and Savita asked for termination of pregnancy, and yet it was denied. And one of the nurses on the maternity ward told Savita and her husband Praveen that this is a Catholic country and it was not permitted to terminate the pregnancy. Well, it is a publicly funded hospital, funded by the taxpayers. And yet, traditionally in Ireland, almost every hospital has been strongly influenced by Catholic religion. So it's not written in the ethos of the hospital, but it's an unwritten ethos that goes on. If you go into any hospital, you'll see religious figurines. The priest will do a ward round before the doctors, and in most wards there will be religious symbols. And the same thing in the constitution of this country. You see, the fetus depends 100% on the mother. The mother does not depend on the fetus. So if the mother dies, the fetus dies. And the priority should be given to the mother, and it's a treatment that needs to be discussed between the patient and the doctor. And the doctor should carry out the treatment irrespective of his or her religious beliefs. And that is the Hippocratic oath that we all take. And that didn't happen in this case.
I was asked by the coroner to give an expert opinion about her care. So I had the notes, her hospital chart, and I went through that forensically, and came to the conclusion that if she had had her termination when she asked for it, she would be alive today. And I also came to the conclusion that there were deficiencies in care when she did develop the serious infection. But she wouldn't have developed those if she'd had the termination of pregnancy when she asked for it. If we didn't have the safety valve, if you like, of going to the United Kingdom, going mostly to Liverpool, which is where most Irish women go, and to London and so on. If we didn't have that, then we would have a big problem with illegal abortion, and we would have a lot of maternal deaths of women from trying to get an abortion themselves. Because that's what happens in countries where abortion is illegal. But we have a very hypocritical constitution, because as well as banning abortion, except unless the mother's life is at risk, we also have in our constitution the protection of a woman to travel abroad to have an abortion and to get all the information she needs to have an abortion. So something that is a criminal offence in Ireland is okay as long as it's done outside Ireland, and that's protected in our constitution. It's just grossly hypocritical. And in countries where there's good education, sex education, and availability of contraception, the abortion rate is much lower. So the Netherlands, for example, Belgium, have very low rates. There are some hospitals in Ireland where they're not allowed prescribed contraceptives, for example. They can't put in an intrauterine coil. The Mirena coil is not allowed in some hospitals. Tubal ligation, sterilisation is not allowed in some hospitals, which are owned by the Catholic Church. I think that there should be complete separation of church and state. I think that people have a right to practice their religion, and they should be allowed to do that freely, but it should be apart from medical practice and from politics. It should just be a separate part of society altogether. And it has no role the church has no role, should have no role in medical practice.
We highlighted all the facts, what went wrong in Savita's case when we did the inquiry. So we had to really focus on what went wrong in the medical care. Medical care subdivided to monitoring the condition of Savita. In the morning, the doctors did a ward round, and they took a small machine called the Doptake or Doptone, and they listened to the baby's heart, despite the fact the previous night she had high pulse rate and temperature and so on. So something in their mind was bothering them, despite the fact they know things are getting worse. And the thing which was bothering them was this fetal heart. And because the fetal heart was there, they thought under the Irish law, we might run into trouble. So in my report, or in our report, my team's report, we put that as one of the factors which the Irish government, the medical profession and the legal profession and the parliamentarians should get together and do something about it. And so finally it is coming to some culmination, not only Savita's case, but also there were other cases which they could have saved their lives if they would have offered termination. If a mother is found to have 18 weeks, she had no periods, and she has breast cancer, she had chemotherapy, and she goes to the hospital, and Every time they thought it was due to the chemotherapy, which causes absence of periods, but then they realized there's a pregnancy, and they checked the heartbeat was there. Then they decided to stop the chemotherapy, and then later the mother died and the baby died. It's because the baby's heartbeat was there. So the whole thing, as I mentioned, is the tip of the iceberg. The death is like this, but so many women we are damaging because we are not acting early. We have to really explain the reality in that situation, because on questioning they asked, I have a conviction of being an abortionist, and I explained it is not a conviction that I'm an abortionist. Everybody in the room is an abortionist. If you don't support legal abortion, indirectly you're supporting illegal abortion. The only thing is it is not seen by you because everything is done in England. The 4,800 women, if they would have the abortion in Ireland, they would be all in prison. So that is impossible to have so many people in prison. So they're keeping what we call is sweeping under the carpet, or keeping a blind eye to what is going on. The world can think what they like about the whole process, but the woman has to have her own rights to say what is best for me, for my family, and so on. And they think very carefully. They undergo, as I mentioned, emotional and physical trauma. So they had to make the decision, and we had to really support it.
Savita's case really touched a nerve with people the length and breadth of the country. It happened after a period of time where we had been trying in the Parliament to force the government to bring in legislation to even deal with the restricted circumstances where abortion was permissible in Ireland. There had been a growing confidence, I suppose, amongst people, a growing breakdown of the stigma around abortion. When I had moved legislation earlier in that year, it was the first time that people openly came forward and identified themselves as women who had had abortions. So the climate was beginning to change. There had been an assertive march for choice. This had been only happening in the last number of years, and the tide was beginning to turn. And then on the back of that, this appalling tragedy of a young woman who was happy to be pregnant in a loving relationship, who had sought medical help and been effectively abandoned and died for no reason. The Catholic Church ran our schools, ran our hospitals, still has a huge influence in that, even though the state funds all of those organisations. The Church's influence is considerable, which is interesting and ironic in that the control of the Church over the hearts and minds of people is completely different. Irish people, while answering censuses now, would say the majority would still call themselves Catholic. It's not in any way the same reverence and respect that was given to the Catholic hierarchy that we saw in instances like the Magdalen laundries or the mother and baby homes, where in Ireland's past women who became pregnant outside of marriage were basically incarcerated behind the walls of Magdalen laundries, forced to give up their children, ostracised and so on, and everybody went along with that because the Church couldn't have that type of immorality going on. Obviously it's dramatically different than that now, in that the Church doesn't have the same control, and the biggest barrier now is the political establishment and their weakness in dealing with this issue.
There had been so many cases before Savita Halappanavar's death involving women and girls who were impacted by the abortion law regime in Ireland, but they'd always been known by a letter: the X case, the C case, the D case, and they were all terrible stories. There were stories of girls who were raped and couldn't get abortion services here, and girls who were in care, in state care, and couldn't travel. Childbirth and pregnancy is in this country is very controlled by doctors and by medicine, and that women should lie down and just, we'll get the baby out of you. I suppose consciousness of the abortion laws and the abortion regime had waned a lot. I mean, people would have known about it, but they wouldn't have had that kind of in-your-face kind of realisation of the impact it had. So a whole new generation of young women were suddenly going, oh my God, I live in a country where this can happen, and that this did happen, and it reawakened a huge movement of feminism, particularly among young women.
There are horrendous things that have happened. To one asylum seeker, you would not. It's like something out of the Middle Ages. A woman that came to this country and she'd been gang raped in her own country, and she'd come here seeking refuge, and she was pregnant. Now, if you're an asylum seeker in this country, you can't leave the country, and there's no abortion here. So she said that she needed an abortion, she was suicidal, and they're like, no. So she actually illegally went over to try and get an abortion in England. The customs, the immigration phoned Ireland, and she was brought back. And she was saying she was suicidal. She went on hunger and thirst strike, so they force-fed her. And they kept saying, all right, we're looking into it. At 26 weeks, they forced her to have a C-section and took that fetus out of her. And it's alive. That poor baby, we don't know what health state it's in. It's alive. And that child, we have no idea what disabilities that child has. No idea what future that child has got.
¿Qué material utilizábamos? Entonces era un material muy sencillo que podía entrar en una bolsa. Había el bote de Nescafé, que había un tapón para cerrarlo, y el tapón había 3 agujeros. Un agujero para el manómetro, para ver el vacío que había en el bote de Nescafé, con una bomba de bicicleta inversada, entonces se hacía el vacío dentro del bote, y el tercer agujero era para poner un tubo transparente hasta las cánulas para absorber el contenido del útero. Y bien, después las medicinas, teníamos siempre el meterrin, que eso era muy importante si había un caso de sangrado más importante, y casi nada más. Sabíamos también que hielo en el vientre si había problemas de hemorragia. Shock vagal hubo muy pocos. Entonces sabíamos que necesitaba tiempo, un poco de atropina también, pero es que no había problemas, porque las mujeres estaban conscientes también que no podían tener problemas. Y además que también son cosas que queman muchísimo, porque no solamente se aspira el útero, pero se aspira todos los tabús alrededor del aborto, que son muchísimos tabús de religión, de muchísimos tabús. Y entonces así eso quema. muchísimo.
Me preguntáis qué dice la Iglesia Católica sobre el aborto y cuál es su relación con las mujeres. Lo voy a explicar a través de las declaraciones de varios obispos españoles, como por ejemplo el obispo de Granada, que en el año 2011 decía que si una mujer aborta, da a los varones la licencia absoluta, sin límites, de abusar de su cuerpo. Tenemos también al famosísimo obispo de Alcalá de Henares, que dice que el aborto es como los trenes de Auschwitz.
I think conscientious objection was started for people who did not want to go in the military army. But that is something else than your obligation to treat women with a need of help who are sitting in front of you. But I know that in many countries, conscientious objection, or better to say, doctors who refuse to help women with a clear demand for help, that is getting a big problem. We know it a little bit in the Netherlands as well. For example, in this hospital, we have our abortion clinic as a part of our obstetric gynecological service. About 50% of women are helped with abortion pill, and the other 50% opt for an instrumental abortion in the operation theater. And we have some nurses who are not willing to help, in this case, with an instrumental abortion. Now we are in the lucky situation that we have enough nurses who are willing to help, so women do not suffer from it.
Sometimes if you just ask women, what do you want? They start to cry and they can tell. But it's very difficult because it's not accepted that you can say, I don't want to have this child, or I don't love my child, or I'm not happy with this newborn baby. I really hate parenthood. It's not allowed. You can't say it in society. And I think if you say it, then sometimes the stress will less and you can deal with it better. But yeah, talking about abortion, it's talking about life. And there's also in this oath, it's written that you should not take somebody's life. But that's the discussion, what's life? What's life for you, for me? When does it start? For me, it doesn't start when it's a pregnancy with 12 weeks or so. If you take it out of the womb, it will not survive.
Some women don't know they are pregnant. They use the pill, they have their period every month, so they don't know they are pregnant. And also many Islam women, and they all tell the same. They all say it's forbidden, I can't talk about this, but I have to do this. And then I just to give them some relaxed feeling, I tell them you're not the only one. I see so many women with your background.
I remember a case of a woman. She was from Portugal. She wanted to have an abortion. She was around 13, 14 weeks. But she was known with myomas. Finally, she came to the clinic. I checked her. Her uterus was really full of myomas. I said, it will be difficult. She says, do you know you are the 6th, so not the 7th doctor who I'm talking with. I went to the doctors. I was 6 weeks pregnant. And he said, yeah, you have a problem. We have to wait. I sent you to another doctor. I sent you to another doctor. I sent you to another doctor. And finally, the 5th or the 6th doctor said, okay, you have a problem with myomas. You have very many myomas. And I was really touched. I could help her. I was very happy with that because it was a difficult job. And she said, I'm so happy with you that I'm here. And I thought, why didn't they tell her a little bit what was really the problem? Because nobody told her. Secondly, she didn't have any wish for children. She never had. And for her, they could take her uterus out.
there are many doctors still, I think, who think that they know what's best for their patient. And the autonomy of a woman, yeah, I think this is one of the best rights. My mother, my grandmother, our mothers fought for here in Holland. So this particular example about the German lady who came in the clinic, she was told in Germany a few weeks ago that she was not pregnant, that the gynecologist did not see anything in the uterus. So she went back only 1 month after that, and then she was told, oh, congratulations, you're 15 weeks pregnant, by the same doctor. So she was really not only surprised, she was angry. And then she was told 15 weeks, so she found out by herself that she could have the abortion in Holland. She planned everything, she made the appointment, she booked a trip, a hotel, etc., etc. And she came in with the story that she would be 19 weeks pregnant. When I did the physical exam, I had to tell her that she was only 13 weeks pregnant, which would say that when she was examined by her own gynecologist, she was only 9 weeks pregnant. And then she showed me her ultrasound pictures, and indeed it was a fetus of 9 weeks. So she was not only rejected, she was not even referred by her own gynecologist. And by the time she was still in Germany, she could have had her abortion. And these cases, I think, it happens many times.
De todas formas, quisiera insistir una vez más en el tema de objeción de conciencia, que a veces se malentiende. Es decir, si definimos conciencia como tal, es un principio, una actitud, digamos, moral, ética o religiosa, que solo puede tener una persona, es decir, solo las personas tienen conciencia. Sin embargo, está extendido el término como algo que podrían asumir instituciones o bien hospitales. Por lo tanto, es algo totalmente contradictorio. Un hospital nunca puede ser objetor.
In reality, there is a very strong pressure on healthcare professionals to follow the policy of the hospital or of the region on abortion. If a healthcare professional decides to help a woman in doing an abortion because that's what his conscience would tell him, and he's working or she's working in a hospital where they don't perform abortions, then there's absolutely no way he or she could do that. Even there would be a threat to lose one's position, one's job, when going against the policy of a hospital. So the discourse, the public discourse and the discourse among healthcare professionals is totally biased and is full of double standards. Now I'm a gynecologist and I'm called to help women who are being refused by other colleagues who claim to be a conscientious objector, but what they understand is they refuse treating women, they put the burden entirely on their patients. So they claim they follow their conscience, but they put all the burden on someone else. And that is fundamentally against conscientious objection.
We demand abortion rights! Stop the church! Stop the state! Women must decide their fate! Stop the church! Stop the state! Women must decide their fate!
So Women Who Waves is a Dutch non-profit organization, and the idea behind it is that if you have a Dutch ship and you go to a country where abortion is illegal, you can take women on board, sail to international waters, and you can provide safe abortion services and legal abortion services there because it's under Dutch flag. Our expertise is that we are able to find that we are developing innovative campaigns and finding legal loopholes in order to try to create access to safe abortions and to break the taboo around abortion. We developed an abortion drone. Recently we had an abortion robot action, and it's always using the different jurisdictions or the loopholes in the law so that women can access
safe abortions or information to safe abortion. As a result of the first SHIPS campaigns with Women on Waves, we started getting a lot of emails from women all over the world. When is the ship going to be here? I need help. And that was the motivator for us to start Women on Web. Women on Web can help women till 10 weeks of pregnancy, so it's only limited periods of time. But that is because abortion with pills is safe to do at home till 10 weeks of pregnancy. Many people did not realize that so many women are using the abortion pills in Ireland. So it was not anymore a problem that was about exporting it to the UK. It was something that was happening on Irish soil. According to our data, 3 women a day are doing their own abortions in Ireland. An abortion is a normal medical procedure. So if you look from it from a public health perspective, there is no reason why a doctor should refuse to do an abortion, because it is life-saving for a woman. Overall abortion rate in the world is about 56 million women have an abortion every year. Of these, about 26 million are taking place in unsafe circumstances. Now, the World Health Organization has divided that in more safe and less safe, because abortion pills have changed the landscape of abortion dramatically. Because with the pills, it's actually never unsafe. The unsafe abortions are the abortions where women cannot find the pills or they don't know about it, and they do invasive methods like knitting needles or jumping off stairs. So the problem starts with the fact that abortion is always a separate item in the law, and it's always under criminal law. It's generating conscientious objection because people see it still as a criminal offense or as an offense because it's still in the criminal code. So the laws should change first. First, abortion should be taken out of all the criminal codes and then it will be part of the normal medical procedure, normal medical regulations. And then you won't have this problem anymore.